Accelerated Learning Binaural Beats. Listen to these Architects Practice Act Business and Professions Code and Architects Practice Act Professional Conduct flashcards to review for the California Supplemental exam. Ensure you consult the most up-to-date version of the APA. The intent of this recording is to review the important concepts related to the Architects Practice Act. Play the audio before you sleep or when you wake up in a relaxed state. Repeat the code guideline and use your imagination to apply it to what you already know. Let this learning tool guide you, knowing you will succeed. Let's begin. The Architects Practice Act consists of the Business and Professions Code and the California Code of Regulations, which is what will be reviewed in this recording. CAB is a division of what department? The California Architects Board, or CAB, is a division of the Department of Consumer Affairs. What's the purpose of CAB? The purpose of CAB is to regulate the practice of architecture to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The goal is also to establish minimum qualifications and performance standards for the admission to and the practice of architecture. How is the practice of architecture defined in the APA Chapter 3 of the Business and Professions Code? The practice of architecture is defined in the APA as follows. An architect is offering, performing, and in responsible control of professional services requiring the skills of an architect in the planning of sites and the design in whole or part of buildings or groups of buildings and structures. The basic level of competence in professional services is the goal of the architect. The architect's professional services include investigation, evaluation, consultation, and advice, planning, schematic, and preliminary studies, designs, working drawings, and specifications, coordination of the work of technical and special consultants, compliance with general applicable codes and regulations, and assistance in the government review process, technical assistance in the preparation of bid documents and agreements, contract administration, and finally, construction observation. The APA defines a person as either an individual, firm, partnership, general corporation, professional corporation, or a limited liability partnership. How does the APA define responsible control? Responsible control is the amount of control over architectural instruments of service during their preparation, ordinarily exercised by architects applying a standard of care. Let's repeat. The responsible control is the amount of control over architectural instruments of service during their preparation that is ordinarily exercised by architects applying standard of care. In the APA, what are the regulations for how to name a business entity? A general corporation can have a fictitious business name, or the name of licensed architects, or architect, or any variation of the word architect or architecture. It cannot include the term professional corporation. What is the fine for illegal use of the term architect? The fine for illegal use of the term architect is a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of not less than $100, nor more than $5,000, or by imprisonment in a county jail, not exceeding 1 year, or by both that fine and imprisonment, for practicing architecture without a license, using similar terms confusingly, using the stamp of a licensed architect, or advertising to the public that they are architects when they're not. Preparation of the instruments of service per the APA involves what? Preparation of the instruments of service involves responsible control of plans, specifications, and instruments of service, and the instruments of service must have a stamp affixed to the documents. What must an architect stamp have? An architect stamp must have 5 things. Number 1, licensee name. Number 2, license number. Number 3, licensed architect. Number 4, it should say State of California. And number 5, the renewal date of the license. Per the APA, an architect's written contract must include: the architect's written contract must include scope of services, also a description of the project, a basis of compensation, and a method of payment, the name, address, and license number of the architect, the name, address of the client, new additional services for contract changes and compensation method of those new additional services, essentially how those new additional services would be handled, termination procedure by any party, statement of who owns the instruments of service, and a statement in 12-point font stating architects licensed and regulated by California Architects Board and listing the CAB address. Per the APA, when is a contract not needed? There are 4 circumstances listed. A contract is not needed, number 1, when a client will not pay compensation. Number 2, when the basis of compensation and the manner of providing professional services is the same in general kind, which the architect previously rendered to and received payment from the same client. Number 3, if the client knowingly states in full disclosure in writing that a contract is not required. And number 4, professional services that are rendered to a professional engineer or land surveyor does not need a contract. Per the APA, what does it mean when an architect uses the term certify or certification? Per the APA, certify is an expression of professional opinion, not a warranty or a guarantee. What projects do not require an architect's license, meaning anyone can work on these projects? There are 4 types. Number 1, single-family dwelling of wood frame construction, not more than 2 stories and basement in height. Number 2, multiple dwellings, not more than 4 dwelling units of wood frame construction, not more than 2 stories and basement in height. Number 3, garages of wood frame construction, not more than 2 stories and basement in height. And number 4, agriculture and ranch buildings of wood frame construction. Per the APA, what if some portion of a wood frame structure deviates from the conventional wood framing? Plans, drawings, specifications, and calculations must be prepared under responsible control of a licensed architect or registered engineer. Again, if some portion of a wood frame structure that normally would not need a licensed architect to stamp, if some portion of that structure deviates from conventional wood framing, then the plans, drawings, specifications, and calcs must be prepared under the responsible control of a licensed architect or a registered engineer. Per the APA, an unlicensed individual or an interior designer can perform what types of projects? In addition to what was listed earlier, an unlicensed individual or an interior designer, for example, can work on only non-structural, non-seismic storefronts and interior alterations, to name a few. What is CAB's authority? CAB's authority under APA is to temporarily suspend or permanently revoke the license of any guilty architect. Per the APA, what are the regulations for filing complaints against licensees or licensed architects? All accusations against licensees should be filed with the board, the California Architects Board, or CAB, within 5 years, and not more than 10 years after the act or omission. Regarding suspension or revocation of licenses of an architect, the California Architects Board may do the following during court proceedings: complete suspension or revocation of license, permit the architect to complete contract for architectural services on the same contract, assess a fine not in excess of $5,000. To repeat, they may complete suspension or revocation of the license during the court proceedings, permit the architect to complete work under the same contract, and assess a fine not in excess of $5,000. Per the APA, within how many days does a licensee have to report to a board for civil action, judgment, settlement, arbitration award if it results in settlement of $5,000 or greater? A licensee must report to a board for civil action, judgment, settlement, or arbitration award if it results in a settlement of greater than $5,000 within 30 days. Per the APA, failure to report to the CAB board can result in what? Failure to report to CAB can result in penalty of $100, but not more than $1,000 in lieu of revoking a license. And if knowingly they failed to comply, civil penalties can be up to $20,000. Again, failure to report to the board of any pending court, judgment, arbitration can result in a penalty of $100, but not more than $1,000 in lieu of revoking a license, and or if knowingly the architect fails to comply, then civil penalties can be up to $20,000. Within 10 days after a judgment by a court that license holder committed a crime liable for death, property due to fraud, deceit, negligence, incompetency, and recklessness, what would happen next? The clerk of the court must report judgment to CAB right away. Within 10 days after a judgment by a court that license holder either committed a crime, is liable for death or property due to fraud, deceit, negligence, incompetency, or negligence. When do licenses that expire require renewal? Licenses expire at 12 midnight on the last day of the birth month of each odd-numbered year following issuance of renewal of license. You must apply before the expiration date with a form and pay a fee. Again, licenses expire at 12 midnight on the last day of the birth month of the architect in each odd-numbered year following the issuance of renewal of license. You must apply before the expiration date with a form and pay the fee. What are the continuing education requirements in California? 5 hours disability access requirements, federal ADA and state accessibility, and 5 hours for zero net carbon design. Again, continuing education requirements in California include 5 hours of continuing education on disability access requirements that include federal, ADA, and state, and 5 hours on zero net carbon design. What must a licensee include in their records for coursework completed as part of their continuing education requirements? They must keep records of completed coursework up to 2 years from license renewal date and keep the course title, subjects covered, name of the provider, date of completion, number of hours completed, and statement about the trainer's background. Whose responsibility is it during the project's submittal to the authority having jurisdiction to verify that the person submitting the plans and stamping the plans is licensed? That's the responsibility of the authority having jurisdiction. What duty is imposed on the architect for signing and stamping the instruments of service? There is no legal duty imposed on the architect to provide construction administration services specifically, unless it's an essential services building, a public school, or a hospital. Per the rules of California Code of Regulations, Rules of Professional Conduct, there are 7 rules of professional conduct. What are they? Number 1, competence of the architect. Number 2, working within standard of care. Number 3, timely response to the board, which means responding to CAB within 30 days. Number 4, conflict of interest, meaning the architect must fully disclose in writing any business associations or financial interest, and if the client objects, the architect must terminate their contract. Number 5, full disclosure, whether they do or do not have qualifications and what their qualifications are for the project. Number 6, copyright infringement, not to copy other professionals' work. And number 7, informed consent, that the architect will not alter the scope without client's consent. Let's repeat. Number 1, the architect must demonstrate competence as part of their professional conduct. Number 2, they must operate within the standard of care definition. Number 3, they must respond in a timely manner to the California Architects Board within 30 days of any question, notice, or mail directed. Number 4, conflict of interest. The architect must fully disclose in writing any business associations or financial interests in the project. Number 5, they must provide full disclosure about their qualifications, about the services being performed. Number 6, avoid copyright infringement for other professionals' work. And number 7, provide informed consent and not to alter scope without the client's consent. Let's define the standard of care definition. An architect shall act with reasonable care and competence, and shall apply technical knowledge and the skills which is ordinarily applied by architects of good standing, practicing in this state under similar circumstances and conditions. Again, an architect shall act with reasonable care and competence, and shall apply technical knowledge and skill which is ordinarily applied by architects of good standing, practicing in this state under similar circumstances and conditions.